Let me tell you a tale not found in books, but in the whispers of the wind and the sighs of the trees. It is a tale of warning, of choices, and of consequences that stretch beyond the world of men. Come close, for the spirits are listening, and they, too, remember. In the heart of the bustling city of Edero, where the rhythms of traffic intertwined with the melodies of street drummers, lived a girl named Zanele. Her father, Baba Kwame, was a man of wisdom, one whose words carried the weight of ancestors long past. He was not just a father, he was a guardian of tradition, a storyteller whose voice could summon both laughter and fear. Zanele, however, was a storm, a girl of fierce spirit, whose eyes held the glint of defiance. The city pulsed through her veins, and she longed for freedom beyond the boundaries her father had set. While her father spoke of old ways, of warnings wrapped in parables, Zanele listened with only half an ear. One evening, as the golden sun dipped beneath the skyline, Baba Kwame sat with his daughter beneath the great baobab tree that stood in their courtyard. The air was thick with the scent of roasting plantains from the street vendors, and the distant hum of life filled the night. "My daughter," he began, his voice steady as the earth. "You are young and your heart is wild, but there are paths you must never take. You must never leave this house after midnight. There are things in the shadows that do not belong to our world. There are voices that call, but they do not call in kindness." Zanele rolled her eyes. "Father, this is the city, not some forgotten village. Spirits do not roam in the alleys. Only late-night dances and the whispers of the wind." Baba Kwame's gaze darkened. "You think because we live among tall buildings and blinking lights, the spirits have vanished? No, my child. They have merely changed their hiding places." Zanele laughed, a sound sharp as breaking glass. "You always speak in riddles, father. But I am no child to be frightened by ghost stories." Baba Kwame sighed, pressing his fingers against the wooden beads around his wrist. "Then you will learn in the way all stubborn children do." That night, as the city fell into a restless slumber, Zanele's mind burned with the desire for adventure. She had spent her life obeying rules, hearing endless stories of unseen dangers. But tonight, she would prove them all wrong. Slipping on a red jacket and lacing up her sneakers, she tiptoed past her father's room, where his rhythmic breathing filled the space. The streets beyond their home pulsed with late-night energy, neon lights flickered against the walls, and the scent of rain mixed with the city's perfume. She walked and walked, feeling the thrill of rebellion sing in her veins. The city belonged to her. But then, she heard it. A voice. Soft. Melodic. Calling her name. Zanele. She turned sharply, but the street was empty. The alley beside her, though dark, pulsed with something unseen. The call came again, a lullaby woven in sorrow. "Zanele, come." She stepped closer, the air suddenly thick with a scent both sweet and sickly, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. Her heart pounded. Was this fear? Or curiosity? Just as she placed one foot into the alley, a sharp wind howled through the streets, and in it, she swore she heard her father's voice. "Turn back." But it was too late. The darkness swallowed her whole. The night after Kwame's return, the city seemed different to Zanele. The neon lights had lost their warmth, and the roads felt unfamiliar beneath her feet. Betrayal had a way of changing the world, twisting even the most familiar corners into something cruel. But Zanele did not crumble. She had made a promise to the ancestors, and she knew they would answer. As the night deepened, she returned to the ancestral altar. The scent of sage and myrrh filled the air, and the candle flames danced like spirits listening in silence. Her voice was steady, her hands firm against the wooden altar. "Great ones, you have seen my pain. You have heard my promise. The man I waited for has returned, but not as the husband he once was. What shall be done? The air in the room grew thick, charged with an unseen presence. The shadows in the corners lengthened, curling like tendrils reaching for something unseen. Then, in the hush of the moment, a whisper slid through the air, low, ancient, and undeniable. Watch. Listen. Do not act in haste. Zanele closed her eyes, her heart steadying. The ancestors were awake. They would guide her path. Meanwhile, Kwame sat in his hotel suite with his new wife, Zanele, oblivious to the forces stirring around them. Zanele had grown up in privilege, untouched by struggle, and her beauty had only been rivaled by her belief that life would always go her way. She stretched lazily on the velvet couch, her golden bangles clinking as she moved. "Your city is quaint," she said, a smirk on her lips. "But I can't wait to leave. I don't see why we had to come back at all." Kwame sipped his whiskey, his face unreadable. "Tying up loose ends," he muttered. "I owed Zanele that much." Zanele laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "She waited for you, didn't she? That's sad." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Is she still beautiful?" Kwame hesitated. The image of Zanele at the airport flashed in his mind, her proud posture, her unwavering gaze. "She is." He started, then shook his head. "It doesn't matter." But it did. And the ancestors knew it. The next morning, as the city awoke, Zanele dressed carefully. She chose a long, flowing dress the color of deep earth, its embroidered patterns echoing the symbols of her ancestors. She did not weep. She did not storm into Kwame's hotel demanding explanations. Instead, she walked through the city streets, her presence commanding, as if guided by unseen hands. At noon, she arrived at a small cafe where she knew Kwame would be. He sat at a corner table, his new wife absent for the moment. When he saw her, a flicker of something passed through his eyes, guilt, perhaps. Or fear. Zanele sat without invitation. "You came back," she said simply. Kwame exhaled. "I did. And you did not come alone." He said nothing. Zanele tilted her head. "Do you remember the promise you made to me, Kwame? That you would return and we would build our life together?" He sighed. "Zanele, things changed. Life happened. I had to make choices." "Yes. And so did I." Kwame frowned. "What do you mean?" Zanele's lips curved slightly, but her eyes were dark with something old and powerful. "You will see." In that moment, a gust of wind swept through the cafe, though the doors were closed. The scent of sage and ancient wood filled the air, and Kwame shuddered. For the ancestors were watching. The cafe door swung shut behind Zanele, leaving Kwame with a strange chill creeping down his spine. The scent of sage still clung to the air, though it had no place in the city's morning bustle. He exhaled, shaking his head. "It's just the wind," he muttered to himself. But deep down, he knew better. That night, as the city glittered with life, Kwame and Zanele prepared for an elegant reception hosted in their honor. The venue sparkled with gold and silver, a testament to Kwame's newfound wealth. Zanele draped herself in an emerald green gown, her diamonds glinting under the chandelier's glow. She was radiant, yet there was a shadow behind Kwame's eyes that even the evening's luxury could not erase. As the guests sipped their wine and the music swayed like a river's current, Kwame felt it again, that presence. The weight of unseen eyes. The ancestors had not left. Then, the lights flickered. A hush fell over the room as the chandelier above them trembled, its crystal singing a quiet, eerie song. The air thickened, charged with something beyond the physical world. And in the silence, a single voice whispered in Kwame's ear. "You will see." Kwame spun around, his breath shallow, but no one was there. Only the weight of a past he thought he had escaped. Meanwhile, Zanele stood in her dimly lit apartment, the ancestral altar before her. The candles burned with an unnatural steadiness, and the scent of sage wrapped around her like a guardian's embrace. She closed her eyes, letting the voices of the old ones guide her. "It has begun," they murmured. "He feels the burden of his choices. But more is yet to come." Zanele bowed her head. "I do not seek to harm him," she whispered. "Only justice." The flames flickered, as if in agreement. The ancestors did not work in haste, nor did they forget. What had been set in motion could not be undone. At the reception, Naledi linked her arm with Kwame's, oblivious to his growing unease. "Darling, you look pale," she teased. "Are you nervous about introducing me to your old friends?" Kwame forced a smile, but before he could respond, the room temperature dropped. A gust of wind curled through the hall, sending shivers up the guests' spines. The candles on the tables flickered wildly, and a murmur of unease spread through the crowd. Then came the laughter. Soft at first, like a breeze rustling through leaves. But it grew, rising and echoing through the grand hall. A woman's laughter, familiar, knowing, and chilling in its certainty. Naledi clutched Kwame's arm. "Who is that?" she demanded, her voice sharp with unease. Kwame's hands trembled. He knew that laughter. He had once heard it in moments of love and devotion. It was Zanele's. But she was nowhere to be seen. The chandelier above swayed dangerously. Glasses shattered on tables without cause. The laughter faded into silence, but the message had been sent. The ancestors were watching. And they were not pleased. That night, Kwame could not sleep. The shadows in his suite stretched too long, the wind outside whispered too clearly. He turned to Naledi, but she lay fast asleep, unaware of the battle raging within him. He sat up, his breath unsteady, and reached for his phone. His fingers hovered over Zanele's number. He hesitated. Then, as if guided by unseen hands, he pressed call. On the other end, Zanele answered on the first ring. "You feel it now, don't you?" she said softly. Kwame swallowed hard. "Zanele, what is happening?" A pause. Then, the same words he had heard before, now spoken with quiet, unshakable certainty. "You will see." The night stretched long and restless for Kwame. The whispers in the wind did not cease, nor did the shadows that seemed to move of their own will. He could no longer tell where reality ended and the unseen world began. Naledi, oblivious to his torment, slept soundly beside him, her breath even and unbothered. But for Kwame, there was no peace. The ancestors were speaking, and their voices were growing louder. A sudden knock at the door shattered the fragile silence of the night. It was sharp, deliberate. Kwame's heart pounded. He hesitated before standing, his feet heavy as if weighed by unseen hands. He opened the door slowly. There was no one there. But in the hallway, just beyond the glow of the hotel lights, a figure stood. Cloaked in darkness, she did not move, did not breathe, yet her presence was undeniable. Kwame blinked, and in that moment, she was gone. A chill settled deep in his bones. He slammed the door shut and turned, his pulse erratic. As he backed away, the television flickered on with a static hum, though the remote lay untouched. The screen displayed nothing but blackness, yet from its depths, a voice emerged. "The past does not sleep. The ancestors do not forget." Kwame gasped and grabbed his phone. His hands trembled as he dialed Zanele's number once more. She answered as if she had been waiting. "They are here," Kwame said, his voice hoarse with fear. "Yes," Zanele replied calmly. "And they will not leave until justice is done." The next morning, Kwame woke to find Nelody gone. Panic surged through him. He searched the suite, but she was nowhere to be found. His calls went unanswered. He rushed downstairs to the hotel lobby, where the receptionist greeted him with a polite yet wary expression. "Sir, your wife left early this morning. She said she needed space." Kwame's heart plummeted. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of the desk for support. Nelody was gone. Just like that. As if the night itself had swallowed her whole. As he turned to leave, the glass doors of the hotel reflected something that was not there. A woman. Her face was not Nelody's. It was Zanele's. Zanele sat before her ancestral altar, the incense curling like spirits rising into the air. The flames of the candles burned steady, their glow illuminating her serene yet resolute face. She was not angry. She did not hate Kwame. But she had made a promise, and the ancestors had accepted it. Justice was not about vengeance. It was about balance. Kwame had broken his oath, and now he had to face the weight of his choices. A knock sounded at her door. This time, she knew who it would be. When she opened it, Kwame stood there. His face was pale, his eyes dark with exhaustion and fear. He looked like a man who had wandered through the spirit world and barely returned. "Help me," he whispered. Zanele held his gaze, unyielding. "The ancestors are watching, Kwame. They have set the path. You must walk it." "I was wrong," he admitted. "I should have never betrayed you. But I cannot undo the past. Please, help me make it right." Zanele studied him, searching his face for sincerity. Then, she stepped aside and allowed him in. The road to redemption was long, but the ancestors had already decided his fate. The reckoning had only just begun. Kwame sat across from Zanele, the weight of his sins pressing down on him like a mountain. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls, elongating their forms like spirits bearing witness. He could not look her in the eye. He had spent years running from the past, but now, he was forced to kneel before it. "Tell me what I must do," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zanele studied him, her face unreadable. "You ask for forgiveness," she said slowly, "but do you truly understand what you have done? You broke a bond sacred to the ancestors. You left me to suffer alone while you built a life elsewhere. You shattered an oath made not just between us, but before those who came before us." Kwame swallowed hard. "I was selfish. I let greed and desire cloud my heart. If I could take it back, I would. But I know words are not enough." The wind outside howled, rattling the windows like restless spirits seeking entrance. Zanele reached for a small wooden bowl filled with white chalk and pressed her fingers into the powder. She marked 3 lines across her forehead and then reached forward, drawing the same markings upon Kwame's skin. He shivered at the touch, feeling the energy shift around them. "Tonight, you will face the ancestors," she said. "If they find you worthy, they may show mercy. But if they do not..." She let the words hang in the air. Kwame's breath hitched. He did not dare ask what would happen if they refused him. As night fell, Zanele led Kwame to an open field outside the city, a place untouched by the hands of time. The wind carried the scent of earth and age-old wisdom. In the center of the clearing, a circle of stones lay, each one carved with ancient symbols. At the heart of the circle, a fire burned, though no one had lit it. "Step forward," Zanele commanded. Kwame hesitated but obeyed. The moment he crossed into the circle, the world around him shifted. The stars above blurred, and the air thickened with unseen energy. The fire roared higher, yet the heat did not touch him. Then, they came. Figures emerged from the darkness, men and women adorned in robes of woven gold and earth, their faces marked with wisdom and judgment. Their eyes held the weight of centuries. Kwame trembled as they surrounded him. "You have dishonored the sacred bond," one of them intoned. "You have broken the trust of those who came before you." Another voice, deep and resonant, spoke. "You seek forgiveness. But forgiveness is earned, not given." The figures raised their hands, and the wind whipped around Kwame like a living force. Visions flooded his mind, Zanele waiting year after year, alone and abandoned, the love he had promised her, cast aside for fleeting pleasures, the moment he had returned, smug and unrepentant, with another woman on his arm. Pain lanced through him, not physical, but spiritual, a tearing of the soul. He fell to his knees, gasping. "I see now," he choked. "I see what I have done." The spirits studied him, their expressions unreadable. Then, one stepped forward, the tallest among them, his skin dark as midnight, his voice like rolling thunder. "Then you shall bear the mark of your sins," he decreed. "For the rest of your days, you will carry the burden of your betrayal. No wealth, no comfort, no love shall stay with you unless it is true. You will wander until you understand the depth of what you have lost. Only then will you be free." A sudden force struck Kwame's chest, knocking the breath from his lungs. His vision went black. When he awoke, he was outside the circle, the fire extinguished. The stars had returned to their proper place. He turned his gaze to Zanele, who stood watching him with solemn eyes. "It is done," she said simply. Kwame felt different, hollow, stripped of the arrogance that once filled him. He knew now that he would never be the same. He had been judged, and though he lived, he would never escape the weight of his past. Zanele turned away, walking toward the rising sun, her path clear, her heart unburdened. She had waited for justice, and the ancestors had delivered it. Kwame watched her go, knowing he could never follow. His journey was far from over. And so, the woman who had waited for her husband no longer waited. And the man who had returned with another wife now walked alone.